In 1950, Brazil built the biggest football stadium the world had ever seen. 200,000 seats, a monument to a nation that was about to become world champion, because it was impossible for them not to. They didn't even need to win the final. A draw was enough. The stadium itself had almost not been finished in time. Construction crews worked through the night in the final weeks, and on opening day, wet concrete was still being poured in some corridors while fans walked past it to their seats. Nobody cared. This was Brazil's coronation, and a little wet cement wasn't going to stop the party. So confident were they, gold watches were engraved for the players before kickoff. A victory song was already written. A newspaper had already printed the headline. There was just one problem. Nobody told Uruguay. What happened next silenced 200,000 people so completely that a man later joked only 3 things in history had ever done it: the Pope, Frank Sinatra, and him. It's been 12 years since the last World Cup. 2 of them were cancelled outright. World War II saw to that. So when football finally returns in 1950, hosted in Brazil, FIFA decides to try something it has never tried before and never will again. No knockout final. Instead, the last 4 teams play each other in a round robin. Whoever has the most points at the end is champion. Which means the 1950 World Cup is the only one in history with no official final match. Just a very awkward math problem that happens to decide who's the best team on Earth. It's a format born partly out of necessity. Europe is still digging itself out of rubble, travel is expensive, and FIFA needs a structure flexible enough to survive last-minute withdrawals. And withdrawals is exactly what it gets, right from the start. Before a ball is even kicked, the tournament loses a team in the strangest way possible. India qualifies automatically, then they simply don't show up. The rumor that spreads for decades is that FIFA banned them from playing barefoot like they had at the Olympics 2 years earlier, and India refused to wear boots. A World Cup team, disqualified by football's most basic piece of equipment. The truth, historians later argue, is messier. A mix of travel costs, the Indian Federation prioritizing the Olympics over the World Cup, and simple miscommunication with FIFA. But the boot story is the one that sticks because it's the one that sounds like football. India wouldn't return to a World Cup for the rest of the century. Other absences shape the tournament just as much. Argentina, one of South America's strongest sides, stays home over a domestic dispute with the Brazilian Federation. Scotland qualifies too, but their federation had made a bizarre pre-tournament promise. They'd only go to Brazil if they won the British Championship outright. They finish second. They stay home on principle. Meanwhile, over in Group 2, a team is about to produce one of the greatest upsets in the history of any sport, and almost nobody is going to notice. The United States lines up against England, the self-proclaimed kings of football, stacked with superstars. The Americans are amateurs with day jobs. A mailman, a dishwasher, a horse driver. Their captain isn't even a professional footballer. London bookmakers price the USA at 500 to 1 to win. 500 to 1. England, for context, had refused to even enter the previous 3 World Cups, considering themselves above the competition. 1950 is their first appearance ever, and they bring a squad most experts consider the best in the tournament, built around superstar-level players and total confidence. 37 minutes in, American midfielder Walter Barr fires a speculative shot from 25 yards out. Nothing special, easy save, except a Haitian immigrant named Joe Geachens, the dishwasher, dives full length, head first, through a crowd of players and just barely grazes it. The ball changes direction. It creeps past the England goalkeeper. USA 1, England 0. England spends the rest of the match battering the American goal. One shot even appears to cross the line before being controversially disallowed. It doesn't matter. The Americans hold on, and one of the most lopsided scorelines in football history becomes real. Newspapers back in England are so certain it's a misprint, some of them run a correction. They think the final score was 10-1 to England, and someone simply flipped a digit. It wasn't a typo. It happened. Geachens never gets a hero's welcome. He goes home to Haiti, opens a dry cleaning shop, and years later, his own brother's politics get him arrested by the regime's secret police. He is never seen again. The man who scored one of football's greatest goals simply vanishes from history. Decades later, FIFA would name that USA win one of the greatest upsets in World Cup history. Geachens never lives to hear it. Back in the main tournament, Brazil is doing exactly what everyone expects. 7 past Sweden, 6 past Spain. The nation is not just winning, it's throwing a party in advance. On the morning of the final round-robin match, the newspaper O Mundo runs an early edition with a team photo and one caption: "These are the world champions." The game hasn't even started. Brazil's mayor of Rio de Janeiro adds fuel to the fire, delivering a speech to the players before the match calling them the champions of the world, again, before a single minute of the deciding game has been played. It's not arrogance to the players. It just feels like fact. One man reads that headline and loses his mind. Uruguay's captain, Abdulio Varela. Varela goes out and buys every single copy of that newspaper he can find. He carries them back to the hotel, spreads them across the bathroom floor, and tells his teammates to spit and urinate on them. Then he stands up in the dressing room and overrules his own coach's defensive game plan on the spot. If we play defensively, he tells them, our fate will be no different than Spain's or Sweden's. His team listens to him instead. Varela's teammates would later describe him as almost supernaturally calm that morning, joking with hotel staff, sipping mate, showing none of the tension everyone else felt. It was a performance, and it worked. If the captain wasn't afraid, why should anyone else be? July 16th, 1950, nearly 200,000 people pack into the Maracanã. Still, to this day, one of the largest crowds ever to watch a football match. Brazil only needs a draw. Early in the second half, they take the lead. The party the counter has been throwing for a week suddenly looks justified. And here's the strangest tactical decision in World Cup history. Instead of restarting play immediately, Varela picks up the ball and marches to the linesman to argue the goal was offside. He knows it probably wasn't. He does it anyway, just to run the clock, calm his players down, and let 200,000 screaming fans lose some of their nerve. It works. Witnesses later say Varela even asked the referee, through an interpreter, to repeat the ruling twice, not because he was confused, but because every extra second was a second Brazil's momentum had to cool down. It's less a protest than a stalling masterclass, and it changes the psychology of the entire match. Uruguay equalizes. Then, with 11 minutes left, Alcides Gigia races down the right wing, cuts inside, and shoots low near post. The goalkeeper, anticipating a cross, not a shot, dives a half-second too late. Uruguay 2, Brazil 1. And then, silence. Not booing, not chanting, just silence from 200,000 people at once. Some fans faint, some have breakdowns on the spot. Stadium doctors treat over 150 people for shock before the final whistle even blows. Only 3 things have silenced the Maracanã: the Pope, Frank Sinatra, and me. Reports from that night describe grown men wandering the streets of Rio in a daze, unable to speak. At least a few deaths are later attributed, however unofficially, to the shock of the result, heart attacks among fans who simply couldn't process what they'd just seen. Jules Rimet, president of FIFA, is standing on the pitch holding the trophy, with a victory speech for Brazil already written in his pocket. He never gets to give it. He quietly finds Uruguay's captain in the chaos and hands him the trophy without a word, without a stage, without a ceremony. To this day, there is no clear photograph of Uruguay lifting the World Cup in 1950, because there was no real ceremony to photograph. It's such an anticlimactic handoff that some Uruguayan players later say they weren't even sure, in the moment, that the tournament was actually over. There was no stage to signal it, just a man in a suit, handing over a trophy in the middle of a stunned crowd and walking away. But the true cost of that match falls on one man, Brazilian goalkeeper Moacyr Barbosa, the one who dove a half-second late. He is never picked for Brazil again. He's denied coaching jobs for the rest of his life. In 1993, he isn't even allowed to visit the national team's training ground because some people believe he's bad luck. At one point, Barbosa is said to have burned the wooden goalposts from his own backyard, ones he'd kept as a memento, just to be rid of anything connecting him to that day. Brazil, a country of over 150 million people by the 1990s, still could not let one man live down a single moment. Years later, he says something that has haunted football history ever since. In Brazil, the maximum sentence for any crime is 30 years. I have been paying for 50. Brazil never wears white again. The kid is blamed, along with Barbosa, for the loss, and the team switches to the yellow and green everyone recognizes today. The most iconic jersey in football exists because of a defeat. The new colors are chosen through a public design contest. A 19-year-old amateur artist submits the winning design, and it becomes the most recognized football jersey on the planet. Every yellow shirt from every Brazilian legend since Pelé, Zico, Ronaldo, Neymar traces its existence back to this single afternoon of catastrophe. FIFA never uses the round-robin final again either. Every World Cup since 1950 has ended in a single winner-takes-all match. The one tournament that tried something different is also the only one that produced a national trauma so severe it still haunts its own word, Maracanazo. The word survives in Spanish and Portuguese language sports media to this day, invoked any time a heavy favorite collapses on the biggest possible stage. Brazil wouldn't fully exorcise the memory until winning the World Cup for the first time 8 years later, in 1958. Every World Cup final since 1950 has been a single match with a clear winner walking off the pitch to a roaring crowd. But the tournament that taught football what a final should feel like is the one that never actually had one. A stadium built for a coronation, a captain who urinated on his opponent's headline, a dishwasher who humiliated England and then disappeared from history, and a goalkeeper who spent 50 years paying for a 2-second mistake. That's the tournament that taught the World Cup its most important lesson. The trophy doesn't care who's supposed to win.